Here's a quick run through for your presidential quiz tutorial or your application. So we open up the instructional piece. What we're going to be building today is a quiz app that associates a list with a text box and an answer all tied together using an index variable. So we're going to have a picture along with a question and an answer all tied together using an index variable, and that is the way that we're able to work with parallel lists. We're also needed to check for the end of the list and then restart the application from the beginning of the questions. So if you want to watch a quick video, see how this works, you can. Right now we have our presidential quiz template. It's a starter app. This app is real blank, other than it has a few images and sound files, but no code design as of yet. So when you import that, you'll find that it is a pretty blank application. Okay, so here's your starter template. As we talked a little bit about, it's going to not have a lot of stuff going on right here. We do have our files imported here. We have our media files, and we don't have anything in the blocks editor, so we are a clean slate ready to begin coding. Okay, so what we are going to do is on our user interface, we need to have an image. We're going to have a button. We're going to have a text box. We're going to have some labels. And the image is used to show a picture that corresponds with the question. So the picture and the question are linked together. And the label under the image is the question label, which is used to display the correct question. And then there's a text box that has the answers linked together as well with the expected answer linked with that question along with that picture. And then the bottom label will indicate whether the user got it correct or incorrect based on what they typed in that text box. So we need to add an image, drag and drop an image component into the viewer. You can leave the image without a picture for now. Later, you'll be using pictures that are included in the template. We need to add some labels. We'll have two labels. For the viewer, we'll have a question label and a correct label. The question label's text will say question 1, and the correct label's text will be empty. It says here these are just placeholders for now and will be changed later. Feel free to modify the font size, etc. of each label. And then we want to add an answer text box and an answer button. So we will drag a horizontal arrangement from the Palace layout drawer, then drag and drop a text box and button into it. Rename the text box to answer text box and the button to answer button. You can change the hint of the text box to please enter an answer and change the text of the button to submit. We need to add the next button and rename the button to next button and change its text to say next. When we're finished, it should look like that. Okay, let's build this. First off, we need to add an image. It says here that you can leave that blank. We need to add in two labels. The first label, we are going to have it renamed to be question label. And its text should read question 1. We have the next label being renamed to correct label. And it says that the text for that should just be blank for now. And it's just a placeholder. We'll rearrange these here in a minute. We need to then drag in a horizontal arrangement. And in there, we need to drag and drop a text box and a button into it. We should rename that text box to be answer text box. And we will rename the button to be answer button. We have the ability to put a hint in here for your text box, and it says to put in there, please enter and answer. And we want to have the text for the answer button read submit. We will also need to add one more button in next to that submit button on that horizontal arrangement, and this is your next button. And have its text read next. Okay, well, it doesn't quite look like we're done yet. That is only because we have not associated a picture with that image yet, but we will. That's going to be happening here shortly. Okay, so what we are going to be doing is the Presidential Quiz app works kind of like an interactive quiz. The user answers a series of questions about various U.S. presidents. With each question, the app reports whether the user's answer is correct or incorrect. The user can move on using the next button, which causes a new question and corresponding picture to appear. Questions, their correct answers, and pictures are all stored in 3 separate lists. Indexing is used to make sure that a particular question is matched with its correct answer and correct picture. So we're using indexing here. We will need to make several lists for this, 3 different lists. We will need to have a question list that has the question displayed in that label. We'll need to have an answer list that is indexed to the same index as that question, and a picture all tied to that same index. So if we have an index starting at 0, maybe moving 0, 1, 2. So at index 0, we have a question that has to do with the president that implemented the New Deal. At index 0 over here, the answer is Roosevelt. At index 0, the picture is Roosevelt. So when we hit the next button, we are indexing to the next question along with the next image, the next answer and the next image. This is the way that we're able to work with parallel lists and indexing. So we will begin by getting a screen1.initialize. This will get us started. We need to set the question label text to the first item in the questions list. The first item in the list is represented by using the select list item block from the list drawer and then specifying the name of the list in the list slot and plugging in a number 1 block in that index list. We'll talk more about indexing later. It says, okay, we need to set image one.picture to the first item in the image list. And we need to set the correct labels text to say nothing. So my screen 1 initialize event handler should look like this. So when we start our application in the screen initializes, we take our question labels text and we select it from the question list at index 1. Okay, so these are starting at index 1, not 0. So we have index 1, 2, 3, not 0, 1, 2, 3. The question picture will also be referred to at the picture list at index 1, and we will initialize our index variable 1. So let's code that up real quick. So first we need to create our lists. We'll have a list of questions, so we need to have a question list. We have 3 variables here. We will have the next one be an answer list. And our final one be a picture list. With this variables, we are using them in a list fashion, so we need to make a list with each of these, and they're all going to have 3 for this particular application, 3 items. So I can duplicate this out, plug them in. Okay, so now we have our variables. We need to now initialize them. And this takes a few seconds for me to type all that out, so I'm going to pause it and then come back to you when we're back. We've got our variables initialized. I see a capitalization here that I'm going to fix there. So we have our questions. Which president implemented the New Deal during the Great Depression? Which president granted China formal recognition in 1979? And finally, which president resigned due to the Watergate scandal? These are tied to these answers. We have Roosevelt, Carter, Nixon, and they're tied to pictures, Roosevelt, Carter, Nixon. Now these are referring to these images down here, and they are case and character specific, so make sure that you have them exactly as you see here listed, because if they're referring to this image and there's anything different in that reference link or the text here, it won't find that image. Next, we're going to be doing that screen 1 initialize event. We need to set the question labels text to select an item from a list at an index. And we're going to grab the question at index 1. We also need to get the picture. So we need to set the question image.picture. Select again from a list at an index. We need to go and get our picture now. And we need to put it at index 1 as well. Let's start off, and we also need to initialize an index variable so that we have something tracking our indexes. So let's have a new variable named index. And it is starting off at 1. All right, next we're going to be dealing with handling the next button click event. So in this, the code works so far only for the first question of the quiz. Now let's code the app so that the other 3 questions will appear, one each time the next button is clicked. To begin, get a next button.clicked event handler from the toolbox. So we have that button, next button. We'll go in there and find that method when it is clicked, what to do with it, and handle it. So it says here, now when the user clicks the next button, 4 things should happen. The index should move to the next question. So for 1, then it should be index 2. That would be the next position in the question list. Unless, of course, the user is at the end of the quiz, then pressing the next button should take them back to the first question. Okay. In this app, the end of the quiz means that the index is at index 3 because there are only 3 questions in the question list. So what happens when the user clicks next? If the quiz index is at 3 and the user clicks next, then the current index becomes 4, but there is no question 4. So when the index reaches 4, it should instead send the quiz back to question 1. Note you should use a length of list block instead of a 3 so that the quiz will work even if you add more elements to the list. Very, very good strategy here is if we have a dot length of list feature, then we can find the length of that list. We will use that to reset our index when we're at the end of the list. The question labels text should also be set to the question at the index in the question list. Image 1 picture should be set to the picture at the index list. And the correct label and the answer button text should be blanked out so that they no longer show the previous answer or whether or not it was correct. So it should look kind of like this. I'm going to code that up real quick for us. Okay, we're back with that next button being coded out for us. Let's read through this. So when we have the event of the next button being clicked, we're going to take our index and we're going to take where it was, add 1 to it. So we have where our current index is plus 1, and then reevaluating the value of our index. So if it was a 1, now is it at 2? If that index value is greater than the length of the list, which we have the availability to get the length of our question list here, if our index is larger than the length of our question list, then we need to go back and set our index to 1. So now our index has been taken care of, it's resolved, and we need to then set our picture to go into that picture list at whatever index we've resolved it to and get that picture. We need to set the question by going into the question list at the index that we've determined, and then we need to set the correct labels text and the answer box text to being blank. So that's our next button being coded up. We will now need to check the user's answer. And the way we will do this, here's some pseudocode. The answer, we will need an if block from the control drawer in the toolbox and modify it to be an if-else block. So we need an equal block from the math drawer. In the first slot of the equal block, put the block that represents the user's selected answer, which would be whatever they typed in their text box. So if what they typed in their text box equals the correct answer for the current question, and we'll need to select list block from we need to select it from the list answer list at the index. So if your text box equals the correct item in the answer list, then you should get a correct response from your label. If not, then the correct label should come back and say incorrect, and then we need to test that out. Okay, so let's code that up now. Okay, so this is all based on when they click that answer button. So when they click this submit button, which we have determined, or we have renamed to answer button, that is when all of this is going to be taking place. So when that answer button is clicked, we need to go in and do some control statements here to do some checking. So we need an if, then else statement. It says here we need to get an equal block from the math drawer. And we need to compare what was in their text box. So whatever text they had in their text box, compare it to the answer list at that particular index. So we need to select items from a list at an index. And we are going to be checking the answer list at the index that we are currently at. Now, if our answer in our text box matches up to the answer in the answer list at that index, then we need to say your correct label needs to come out and its text needs to read something like correct. However, if we did not match the answer in our text box to the answer in our answer list at that index, then it needs to come back and say incorrect. Oh. Let's test this app to see what we have, what we're doing, and what we've got going on here. Okay, so we're going to test out this presidential quiz app. We've got it up and running here. We have an image here that's associated with a label and an answer, all indexed so that they follow each other. So we have a picture here, and it has a question. Which president implemented the New Deal during the Great Depression? And I'm going to type in the answer. This is, again, case sensitive and space sensitive, so you need to make sure that you type in the correct answer. So I'm going to put down Roosevelt and hit submit. It says correct there. Good. It is case sensitive, and so if I were to go back to the beginning and maybe make that a lowercase Roosevelt, hit submit, it is incorrect. Okay, hitting the next button will advance the index, which will then associate a new picture with a question and an answer. So it says here, which president granted China formal recognition in 1979? I'm going to go in here and I'm going to type in the answer. I'm going to say Carter. Submit, correct. And if I have a space after that, I hit submit, it is going to be incorrect. So that spacing there is important, so we don't have that extra space there. Advance to the next question. Which president resigned due to the Watergate scandal? I'm going to type in Nixon. Hit submit, correct, and then hit the next button to advance the index back to the very beginning. So we have the first question at index 1.
Okay, so that is a run-through for your presidential quiz app. And using parallel lists and an index variable. Thank you.